Hello, and welcome to Beyond the Firewall, the business bycast, where tech meets business. Get expert insights and real-world business leaders, IT experts, and the latest trends in bite-sized episodes. Stay ahead and explore what's beyond the firewall. And welcome back to Beyond the Firewall, where we're always trying to bring you the latest information, business leaders, and the direction of where your business is going to go. Today, we actually have a very unique and special guest, Jennifer. Jennifer, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Erez. Really excited to be here. I appreciate the opportunity. So a little bit about myself. I have been in real estate and franchise development for 15 years, mostly in hospitality development. What does that mean? That means probably just restaurants has been my primary focus, retail real estate as well. So over that time, I've been very privileged in franchising to have a first-hand look at a franchisee application and someone's individual net worth, what they hold in assets, how much salary and income they have in their household, and how they grew wealth. And that curiosity got the better part of me. So I, over time, learned about investing in real estate myself, and then went on to become a licensed real estate agent in 2019. And then in 2021, I incorporated my first company that holds real estate. So went from owning single family residential and then owning multifamily. What does that word mean? It means apartment buildings. So I've now invested in 2 apartment buildings, one I sold off recently. And my real estate license is another activity that I'm very busy with. So I do work with everyday people of all different walks of life and a wide range of net worth. So someone who is a new immigrant, they're new to Canada, maybe they have just gotten their PR status or their citizenship and they're ready to buy their first piece of Canadian real estate, all the way up to people that have tens of millions of dollars worth of net worth. So it's really exciting to work with those people as they search for their homes. But my career has primarily been focused on commercial real estate. So I do use my license for commercial real estate transactions as well, usually specializing in flagship-worthy restaurant real estate leases or hospitality projects. I was doing hotel real estate for a period of time. So if someone is looking to sell their hotel or they're looking to buy more hotel assets, that is something that I have specialized in as well for a short period of time.
That's incredible. You know, not everybody has that kind of diversity when it comes to real estate. Everyone's usually focused on just, residential or just commercial or, multi-tenant. I always, I'm intrigued about how you've transitioned or taken the knowledge that you've done in franchising and commercial and diversified that and now into multifaceted type of real estate. Most people usually don't want to dip into that other side of the fence. It's quite unique. And so, one of the things I'm always hesitant around real estate, and I think today there's maybe a bigger, hesitation than there has been in the last couple of years. What's that unexpected reality since, you've launched this venture that people should be aware about?
Wow. So
loaded question.
I'd like to answer it with a spectrum in mind, because the reality is most people only own, if they own a piece of property, they own their primary residence. The majority of people do not have the opportunity or privilege to own a secondary property. And then there are people where it gets complex. So I will answer the question with a spectrum. Everyone out there who owns their primary residence right now is facing the same challenges, which is mortgage renewals and increases in interest rates since they did their mortgage. Not only are they facing a gigantic increase in the monthly payment owing on their primary residence, but they also might be facing what I also have in my portfolio and I've had to manage and deal with and budget for, interest arrears. And if someone does own multiple properties, we talked about this a little bit before we hit the record button today, they might have done what I did as well, which is the property value goes up, equity goes up, and then you pull some of that equity, and that equity now becomes down payment for property number 2, property number 3. property number 4. So you're stacking equity to expand your real estate portfolio. And depending on the speed that you did that and how much percentage equity you took, if you took 100% of what was available, or if you took 10% of what was available, all of those factors determine where you might be sitting right now with interest rates changing. For myself, having, I didn't grow up in this business. I am a self-made entrepreneur. Everything I have come up with by myself. So a lot of my lessons could have been avoided if I was second generation, right? But for me, all of my mortgages are variable because I like the opportunity to continue to draw on the equity to play around and buy more property or refinance and renovate. I like the flexibility that variable mortgages give me. Because of being variable, then you stack up interest arrears with the hurricane of interest rate changes we've just seen. And then if you're only invested in real estate, again, we touched on this briefly before we hit the record button. If you're only invested in real estate is not a substantial cash flow generating venture. It's an equity game. It's a longer term play. So you're not typically getting the huge percentage EBITDA or net operating profit out of a real estate portfolio like you would a business. So if someone really is only invested into real estate, this is a very difficult time, especially if, like me, you stayed variable instead of going fixed, even on a blend of your portfolio. So I think whether you are someone that just owns your primary residence or you're someone with a more complicated, complex real estate portfolio, you've moved out from single family to multifamily, and maybe you've moved into hotels or other real estate asset classes like strip malls, you have puzzles to solve right now, is the long way to getting to that statement, right?
Right. Yeah, it's a tough one. I would say that, Canada has not seen a shakeup this bad. At least Toronto, I know, hasn't seen a shakeup this bad since like the 90s. So, we're in uncharted territories for most real estate investors. I think the last time this happened, I was a kid, and it's been pretty steady. Yes, there's been some minor corrections, but nothing to this extent where these double-digit adjustments and global economy and all the other variables that we're looking at today. And so I'm always intrigued to see how people weather this storm, and I'm really intrigued about, let's call it what you've potentially done in the earlier stages of this business that were a game changer to help you weather this storm. Like, what were those sort of foundational decisions that are allowing you to weather this today that's critical for people to know?
Yes, I think, if you are going to invest in an investment property, if it's your second in your portfolio, or if it's your fifth or your 10th or your 20th, you really need to first analyze the legislation in the province that you are investing in, because the legislation for landlords and tenants is very different from province to province. So, for example, we have a portion of our portfolio in our personal names in Ontario. And then we have our portfolio within our holding company that has apartment buildings in New Brunswick. When we first invested into New Brunswick, there was no rent control at all in any form. And the province was very pro-landlord and pro-development. So if you had a tenant that was not paying their rent, it was actually a very smooth process to remove that tenant and have, like, the sheriff will get involved, like their authorities will get involved to help your tenant vacate that unit. So that kind of oversight from the provincial level, you have to know the rules, right, for each province and what your obligations are as well.
Right.
We had a situation with, I'll tell you this one, oh my goodness. We had a situation with one of our buildings where a truck drove all the way through our building, through the commercial storefront, which was an antique store. So through the entire front of the store and through a secondary wall, which was the side wall, which was load bearing. And that unit's commercial storefront. And then there were apartment buildings. It's a sixplex. So the other 5 units were single family residential apartments. So the entire building had to be vacated right away. If that building was in Ontario, as a landlord, I would be legally obligated for the housing cost of all of those displaced tenants for a very long extended period of time. Whereas in New Brunswick, my obligation was very different. The Red Cross put those tenants up for being displaced for 3 nights. And then after that, the tenants had to find new housing, right? The province isn't going after the landlord. So I think the first thing you need to do is really study, take the time to study the differences between each province and what obligations and responsibilities will fall on you as a real estate developer of residential housing or commercial. What's going to fall on you? And you also have to have, we talked about this a week ago, you have to have a large reserve for all kinds of reasons. There will be capital improvements that come up that need your attention that you did not budget for and were not part of your pro forma. So I'll give you one example. My other apartment building that was 9-unit apartment building, someone called the fire marshal and complained, hey, I don't have a window in my bedroom. And this was grandfathered in. This building is around 50 years old. So, but it's true. That is a safety hazard. So we had to make significant improvements to that building that were not budgeted for to comply with the fire marshal order. There will be a number of surprises that come up, whether you're investing in apartment buildings or you're investing in businesses. And you need to have a line item on your pro forma and your financial projection to calculate an extra percentage over and above repairs and maintenance so that you can put money in for capital improvements or things that were not budgeted for. So capital repairs and maintenance might be 4% annually of gross revenue. Capital repairs and maintenance or renovations could be another 8%. It really depends on the age of the building, but you do need to build in that cushion and that buffer. Same with the restaurant business and franchise businesses. You need to be budgeting not just for a percentage of repairs and maintenance and upkeep of your asset, but surprises.
Right. Yeah, there's always surprises with real estate, even when you do the best of budgets. You know, one of the things that I hear on the street with a lot of my colleagues is south of the border. You know, they're always saying, "Oh, better opportunity on investments, cost of it." What's your take on, you know, the U.S. and investing in real estate in the U.S. markets today?
Mm-hmm. It really depends on the asset class. So
Right.
I have a whole big network of really intelligent colleagues in real estate, commercial real estate across the country. I've been at all of the International Council of Shopping Centers, so ICSC. I've been at those events for over a decade now with all of the commercial landlords, developers that are at the highest level in Canada. So I know those people, they're my close friends and trusted confidants. And I also have that network in the US as well, having done restaurant development in the US too. What I will tell you is you got to look at the asset class first. Are we talking about hotels? Are we talking about apartment buildings? Are we talking about retail centers, warehouse space, etc.? But as I have personally dug into opportunities between Canada and US, usually the pro forma in the US is better, right? You can't compare the two markets because we do not have anywhere near the same population density. And
Right.
the supply and demand factors put additional strain on our supply chain. So our costs to build are higher per square foot here by a long shot. Usually our labor per hour, depending on the trade that you need, etc. We're paying a premium on supply chain and a premium on labor just because we don't have the same headcount per capita. Like we don't have the same population
Right.
in this country. So it's difficult to say, let's compare these two when they are completely different.
Right. Yeah, no, it is definitely, you know, always the grass is always greener on the other side when it looks like that. And then there's always, you know, from what I've heard outside of the initial investment, there's always the tax implications, foreign investment implications. I think a lot of people think, okay, I'm just going to buy a house at 50%, you know, of what it costs up here in Canada to buy in the States. And then you're dealing with the IRS, you're dealing with foreign investment taxes. Their rules and restrictions are a lot more strict than ours. And that's part of the reason why you don't see that same opportunity. And a lot of people get burned when they try to make those investments, and the next thing you know, they can't get their money out, or if they have, certain challenges with banking and finances, and unless you got a lot of liquid cash, you're in big trouble over there. So
Yeah.
yeah, I've heard some horror stories, but there's always these pictures of mansions under $1 million, where in Canada you're lucky to buy a condo. So it's an interesting optics that I think a lot of call it rosy glasses are worn when they see the opportunity down there. So
Yes.
you know and I always want to kind of, we're a little bit of a tech shop, so I'm always intrigued on throwing a little bit of a tech conversation in this. And I find that construction and real estate tend to be very much brick and mortar physically, but operationally, a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of real estate today is still very much a brick and mortar. And I don't hear a lot of technology. I don't hear a lot of AI. I don't hear a lot of automation. Do you use AI in your business today, and do you see a trend growing in that space for what you do?
Yes. 100%. I use AI for everything.
Okay, good.
Yeah, we could do a whole episode just on the AI that I use. I'm sure that could be its own full episode. So, for my real estate license, I use a platform called Lofty. Lofty is an exceptionally powerful tool. Lofty connects to my website, and it's also my lead generation database. I have an AI assistant that automatically follows up with leads in a very specific way via text, email, and they're constantly populating a lead score of how interested that person is and priming that person before I place an actual phone call to them. So as soon as someone enters their information onto my website, they will immediately be hearing from me, right? Which is really cool. It doesn't matter if it's 4 a.m. in the morning, which oddly enough, when people can't sleep, guess what they're doing? They're looking at real estate and they're daydreaming about what they're going to buy next. So Lofty, I love to use for my real estate license. When it comes to my business that I own and this portfolio of real estate, there are a number of things that I use. Honestly, I do love to use ChatGPT. You would be amazed if you just know the right prompts, and if you feed it a performa, right? So if you provide ChatGPT with your own performa and you give it the KPIs that you're looking for, this is the payback period I require, this is my cash on cash, this is the total return on investment, and you give it as much detail as possible, it really does help you refine your search. And it will also call out some watchouts if you're looking at buying a property. You plug in enough information like here's the age of the building, here's the type of units it has, here's how many vacancies. The more information you feed it as you're doing due diligence, it will give you incredible data to review, right? As part of your due diligence. So before ChatGPT, all of that is manual. Right? Like when I bought our first apartment building, because of franchising, I've had the luxury of traveling Canada for my career. So I've been to every corner of the country, and I've been all over the US as well. I'm not afraid to invest in other provinces. It doesn't bother me, right? Because I'll hire resources to help me run that from afar. When I was first buying our very first apartment building, I looked across the entire country for multifamily real estate, narrowed down the search to over 8 units. And then I was looking for a very specific rent roll to purchase price ratio. I'll give you an example. There was a 6-unit apartment building up the 401 corridor here in Ontario, and it was asking $1 million, and the rent roll was around 60,000. Then there was a 9-unit apartment building in New Brunswick with the same rent roll of 60,000, but the asking price was 600,000. So all of that was manual, like just looking at rent roll to purchase price ratio. But now with AI, if I plug in what I'm hoping to achieve and I start collecting information on opportunities that are on the market, it's amazing what just ChatGPT will give you back, right? And then day-to-day tasks, like I'm using Copilot, I'm using ChatGPT. For producing social media, my favorite right now is Opus Clips. I love Opus Clips. It automatically populates the clip for me. I can schedule it into my calendar. It's automated. It's incredible. So We really could do an entire episode just on AI.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm good for you that you're actually embracing that and taking advantage of, let's call it a lot more than what the average entrepreneur today is utilizing AI. We as a day-to-day business, I'm supporting companies out there, and a lot of entrepreneurs are still trying to figure out the pieces and trying to figure out what their play is with AI. And do I invest time and effort in one platform or another, or do I buy this product? And a lot of individuals are still kind of putting the pieces together, as I like to call it. So you're already immersed into it, and you're, from what I can tell, well further ahead than most. So good for you on that. And so you're taking it, full force with everything in respect to, managing the market, managing technology, you know, and dealing with it head on. Do you see Canadian businesses being as aggressive, or do you see other Canadian businesses being more risk adverse and sort of, holding back and trying to, hold on to their pieces? Where do you see that happening today?
I love this question. Okay, I'm going to go back a little bit here. So last January 2025, Trump took office. And as soon as he took office, all of the entrepreneurs that I get to work with on a weekly basis, none of them wanted to grow in 2025. I would say 90% of them did not want to grow. When I say grow, I mean open another location of their franchise or open another auto shop, because the people that I work with, they usually have multiple locations under the kind of business that they run, right? So
Right.
typically you would see them growing and opening other locations year over year over year, which is their scaling. But as soon as Trump took office, there was so much hesitancy, because it wasn't just him taking office, it was the tariff roller coaster. All of the unknown answers to questions on everyone's mind. How is this going to affect supply chain? How long will tariffs last? How is this going to affect the employees if I have foreign workers? Is it going to affect policies here in Canada for foreign workers? What will be our immigration policy changes that we'll see in this country? Will it be as easy or not to get your PR here in Canada? That's gotten increasingly difficult to get your PR here. We've lost very talented immigrants in the last 2 years that have had to go back to their home countries. So we've seen a ton of changes that would affect whether you feel comfortable growing or not. That was last year, right? So not that tariffs have calmed down, but I think just on tariffs, people, it leveled out a little bit. And those same entrepreneurs are going, okay, maybe I am going to grow in 2026. But then, bam, all of this geopolitical tension, war, issues that are directly affecting supply chain. We can see it at the gas station right now, right? I think it's like $1.86 at this moment. So all of these things are putting pressure on inflation, supply chain, and those same entrepreneurs are going, 10% of them might be willing to grow this year, right? 90% are going, I just need to work on holding on to what I've built. And to do that, I mean, the only real way to do that is to be prepared for these kinds of situations with very large reserves of cash, just in case you need them, so that you don't have to liquefy, sell things you don't want to sell when the market's taking a downturn. So yeah, it's a difficult time to have confidence. We've seen record low consumer confidence just in general, according to studies. So that record low consumer confidence applies to these entrepreneurs as well. We have record low confidence in expanding your business over the last 18.
Right. Yeah, there's been a lot going on between elections, both sides of the border, a lot of changes. We're still, I call it the post pandemic fallout as well, because, there was a lot of adjustments between people working from home, you know, We had a lot of productivity shift, also supply and demand on labor. So people were paying over and above. And then now we've got the AI. I don't know if you saw it in the last week. I think Oracle let go of like 20 to 40,000 employees, and like that's a big chunk of their employment. And I heard other manufacturing and other sectors that are not really impacted because software is not, tariffed. It's a virtual piece of equipment or software. These industries are also getting impacted. So it's a fairly large mixed bag of variables that are really hitting it. And I think that Canada is in an interesting time right now. When we look at that mindset, we're in definitely some sort of cash crunch. We're in a shift. People are being called back into work, but usually there are winners coming out of this. And I always like to say that with the market in its transition the way it is right now, there are big opportunities, and those opportunities are definitely out there. Do you see people in your space having, some people are calling it generational opportunities, where housing and this product that's normally not available is becoming available, and people are, able to take advantage of stuff that they have not seen in a long time?
Yes. However, at least, focus group of one, this is just my personal circle of people that I get to work closely with
Sure.
every day, every week, every year. So it's just my individual answer. From what I see on a regular basis, the only people who can afford to actually jump on those opportunities during a downturn have tens of millions of dollars worth of net worth, right?
Right.
Here's why. Okay, housing prices have come down. Great. That's great. However, inflation is very high, and housing prices, like right now, as you said, Oracle just laid off a lot of people. Job security is a huge issue right now. People are very nervous about losing those sources of income, and maybe they have already, right? How do you qualify for that mortgage is the most important question. That's question number one. So
Sure.
just because, we've seen a dip, like the average price in Milton right now is just over $1 million. It's $1,040,000 per unit right now in Milton for a freehold unit. Okay. 3-bedroom. That's down about 25% over the last 2-3 years when we saw a peak. And for the most part, the Greater Toronto Area, Golden Horseshoe, is down between 20 to 30%. But it's still averaging, you're still averaging what, $850 to $1 million for a 3-bedroom freehold home. It's still expensive. So the question is, how am I going to qualify for this first mortgage or this second mortgage with where interest rates are sitting now? Am I going to be able to afford to make the payments now versus when interest rates were so cheap, right? When it comes to plazas, strip malls, hotels, apartment buildings, mobile home parks are very much of interest to me as well. Trailer parks, right? Campgrounds, like these are really interesting business models that I know a number of people are invested in those asset classes right now. The valuations on those have come down. And for businesses that are not well insulated, they might be forced to sell. And a buyer could come in and take advantage of that. But that buyer has a very robust book value. They have a very robust net worth corporately and personally in their personal names. The 10% that grow, that I've been seeing grow, they already own huge portfolios of real estate, diverse real estate, and diverse businesses like franchises or independent businesses. So yeah, you can take advantage, but it's not the everyday Joe and Jane that are going to be the ones having the advantage, in my opinion.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's exactly what you said there. The well structured, well to do corporations are going to take advantage of the people that doved into it. And those first time home real estate investors are really not going to have that opportunity for the most part. You know, I look at it as very challenging. My concern around this whole thing was for my kids, because at this point in time, like I bought my home, and 4 bedroom for well under $1 million, and today, my house peaked at almost 2.5 million at one point in time. And I just couldn't fathom that, the 5 times the price of what it was originally built for, in
Mhm.
less than 15 years. So it was, Toronto definitely had a hyper growth, disproportionate scale of real estate value to income. And I think that correction needs to happen in one way, shape, or another.
Yeah.
Um, so, you know, we touched on the economy. We're talking about, I'm not going to say it's doom and gloom, because nobody's really, living on the streets right now. But obviously, people can buckle down and, realign their checkbook and figure out where to invest money and stuff like that. But I always like to say there's usually a silver lining somewhere. And so, what I would love to understand is, what's your predictions over the next couple of years, as we're kind of, weathering this storm, and what the landscape is going to look like in the next 2 to 3 years. What do you see is happening?
Oh, that's difficult to
We're not
answer.
going to hold you to the answers if you're in it wrong. It's your opinion.
I'm just guessing. Okay.
Yeah, for
I'm
sure.
guessing. So that's the caveat. But I think what we're seeing regarding geopolitical issues and wars and tensions, I think it's going to continue to escalate. If I'm being pragmatic and practical, I think that's the direction it's heading in. I'd love to be wrong, but I'm very concerned about the state of the world and affairs and wars in multiple zones and countries. I don't think that is a quick solve based on the trend we're seeing right now. Because of that, the supply chain is going to continue to be put under pressure, and so is inflation, right? Everything from groceries to gas to housing. And the trend with AI is unstoppable. So we will continue to see a complete reshuffling of the workforce just because of AI alone, right? So it's not enough to have gotten a university degree. It wasn't enough before. My generation, they said, go to university and go to college, and you're going to be the first one picked, and you're going to be paid more, and all of the lies they tell you in Fresh Week, to promote their amazing institution. And I'm for education, but that is what they tell you. And the truth is, you will start at the bottom, and you will start on a very small salary, and you will have to work your way to the top. And that is after getting a degree. Now you need to also be extremely fluent with AI to be employable, in my opinion. And the more versed you are with AI, the better. I would say, I would strongly encourage people, two things, because you touched on earlier. Number one, all of these platforms have a free trial version. Just try something. You don't have to commit to it. You can try it free for 7 days, try it free for 14 days. Just open it up and see what it looks like, and play around with the platform and see if you like it. A lot of them are extremely intuitive,
Mhm.
and easy to use. And if they're not, Google it. I've been Googling everything, and AI populates the answers for me. So we're seeing a shuffling of the workplace. It's going to be increasingly difficult, I think, to gain employment for that reason. And you will really need to develop more of a strategy to be employed, and also to own your home. Like you said, I'm concerned about, if my kids, I hear that all the time. I'm worried about my kids being able to buy a house. And my answer to people is always the same. And maybe this is just my paranoid answer, but this is my strategy. They won't. They will not be able to buy a house. You have to buy it for them now. And that is what I have done. So I have 3 properties in my personal name, which is my primary residence. And then I have 2 freehold houses in my personal name as well. And those 3 will go to our 3 kids in a 25-year timeline, right? And I will buy a 4th in my personal name in the next 4 or 5 years that I will then live in. Everything else is in a holding company, or it's going to be owned through our family trust. but you can't pass things on easily to kids if it is within a holding company or family trust. So don't be worried about them buying real estate in 25 years from now. The answer is they probably can't. But for you to leverage what you can now and buy a home for them and be able to pay down that mortgage over time if you have the leverage available, that is the best thing that you could help them with, right? And if they want to go gallivant around the world, they want to move to Europe, they want to move wherever, great. They can still own that property and it can still build equity for them and it can still generate cash flow for them or for you by the time a 25-year amortization period is over. That's a long answer to your question of what do I see happening, but it's going to be multifaceted: geopolitical tensions, supply chain, reshuffling of the workforce, and Canadian economy and global economy. So we're in for it. I don't see it getting easier for us. I see it getting trickier to navigate. And you can. It's just you really need to think critically and have a strategy.
Well, I fully agree with you on almost all those factors because I see between the geopolitical, the AI, two biggest variables right now. People were already not aware of the repercussions of efficiencies that we're seeing with AI. And once it actually gets a foothold into 80% of businesses, we will see a massive shift. And the other question right now is who's going to replace the existing staff that are doing day-to-day activities that are manual. They either need to be retrained or you need to bring in new talent with that skill set. And then on top of the rest of the variables that, I think we're in for another one of these geopolitical, I call it international business adjustments, right? Like I remember 20 some odd years ago when China got into the market and dollar stores were a new thing and products that were being brought in from China were just a new concept and prices started falling through the floor and people were like, wow, this is amazing. And now we're in a bit of a transition because of reliability. At the end of the day, we've been relying on these trading partners that have been stable. And if we're not going to have a stable relationship, how do companies transition? And the pandemic was a good example where we couldn't get essential products, never mind security products that we needed on a daily basis, that we relied on these trading partners to get in. And so everything's all happening at the same time. And I think right now, Canada's in an interesting predicament in the sense of how it's going to navigate all of these different headwinds. And I think there are some opportunities there. And I think that Canadians are very resilient, which is good. As much as we're conservative, I call ourselves conservative business owners, but I think we're very resilient. And I think the nice thing is that we can, hunker down, weather, let's call it a blizzard, where some other people can't. And I think that at the end of the day, when we get through this, we'll be definitely a lot stronger, a lot better. And I think certain values and certain industries will see a shift. But I also think deep down, I believe that there's going to be new industries and new markets that will, let's call it, explode and do very well that have currently no market space. Because I think that certain industries are currently underserviced. And with everything going AI, that personal human element of business is going to explode in a different vertical. So we'll wait and see where that's going to land, because you can't buy houses always on online and an AI agent. You need that personal touch. And I think in every aspect of it, be it hospitality, restaurants, franchises, McDonald's and Burger King and all these guys can build robots in the background to create your burger, but somebody's got to serve it to you. Otherwise, without a smile, what's the point? You know what I mean? At the end of the day, you want that smile and you want that experience. So, yeah, definitely. Will be interesting to see where that goes.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I agree with that point. You ultimately need trust still in a transaction. So you can replace a lot of the minutia and the boring tasks with AI, But if you're going to buy a house, you're going to buy an investment property, a business, you're going to build a condo development, I think ultimately AI can be an incredible tool. But as a human being, just myself speaking, I need an expert looking at me in person, walking the site with me, giving me their confidence and instilling trust for me to be able to say, where do I sign? Let's buy it, or let's develop it. Let's do it.
Yeah, no, for sure. So, you're a really unique entrepreneur, and I meet a lot of entrepreneurs out there. You've got this corporate, experience, you've got your own business experience, you've got these multi pillars that you've been able to assimilate and have the notches in your belt that you've done it on all different elements. As a business owner today, with the current market, what would you give other entrepreneurs, some sort of advice about how to tackle all of these different variables?
I would say, at least for myself, I love to just jump into activity, right? Now is the time to pause. As excited as you might be about your strategy and making moves, I'm going to give you the advice I hate the most, which is stop, drop, and roll. Okay?
Okay.
Stop for a second, pause, and have you done a sensitivity analysis on your pro forma, on your projections? What if your sales call is 30% less than what you think it will be? Does it still break even? Can you still cover your costs? Can you still afford to set aside a capital reserve? Pause, analysis, research. It's the time to stop and make sure that you're taking extra time before taking action. Usually my advice is the opposite. You can only daydream so much. You got to do something. You got to get out of bed and actually do something that day, right?
Yeah,
Take
yeah.
action. This year, it's different. You should really be collecting your research, making sure that you've built in extra room in your projections and pausing, and also trying to make sure, do I have the resources to do this? Financial, people capital, intelligence capital. Am I ready? And then go.
Yeah. Okay. That's pretty solid there. I think that, you know, I agree with you. Normally, I would say the biggest hesitation most entrepreneurs today have is that they lack action. So, but yeah, this is one of those years you definitely don't want to be taking, Hail Mary opportunities and say, yeah, we'll take a chance on everything. And so, every entrepreneur there has sort of a skill set. And I think you nailed it on that. What sort of skill set or habits have you been practicing to help you kind of be proactive like that? Sort of, what is it, a daily ritual? Is it something that you've been sort of studying to be more effective as a leader today, to realize some of these kind of adjustments as a person? I know I always have to like do some reading and research to try to be a better entrepreneur. What's sort of been your, what has been your latest habit to kind of hone your perspective?
When I hear the word leader and entrepreneur, I think a lot of people, it feels out of reach. And so I'm not going to answer it like that. I'm going to answer it like, what has expanded my inner world? Because everything is stemming from your daily life in your inner world. So I love to practice meditation. I love practicing meditation. I listen to podcasts every single day. There are certain shows that I follow that I find very inspiring. I learn. I'm always learning. I'm always either working or I'm learning. And my enjoyment is in learning. So if I have an hour of leisure time, I would much rather spend that hour listening to a podcast that's going to change and influence my inner world and how I'm feeling, versus watching a movie that I would have watched even 2 years ago. I would have just turned on a rom-com. And what is that doing to your inner world, right? It's really not doing much. So I think really protecting the information that you have coming into your inner world on a daily basis. Are you just following all the headlines in the news? And it's important to know what's going on in the world, but how many minutes of your day are you spending reading about it? Okay. Versus how many minutes a day are you spending hearing someone talk about how they've improved their mental health, how they have digested their emotions, how they've dealt with difficult situations, how they've dealt with loss. I'd much rather be filling up my inner world with that kind of information and just taking time to be kind to myself. So developing my inner world through meditation, listening to podcasts every day, and closely guarding what kind of data I'm taking in on a daily basis has changed my life. And it's given me the courage to act on my passions and pursue my passions. And I think if you lack courage and you don't believe you can do something, then you won't act. So how are you going to develop your inner world? How are you going to build up your own self-courage? Because you need the courage before you can take action, And if it's not there, you can take action and it will give you the courage. That wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. I bet you I could do it again, right?
Right.
So really working on the inner world has translated into leadership, business, entrepreneurship. And also just that element, that human element has been what's made me a fantastic leader, because everyone I work with, everyone I hire, I see them first and foremost as a person. They're a person. They're not an obstacle in my way. They're not a thing. They're a person. And what's their state of well-being today? What's going on in their life? Caring, right? Caring goes a long way. There's been so many studies done on empathy. Empathy is the number one leadership quality and attribute that separates successful leaders from unsuccessful leaders. Empathizing with people. So I hope that answers your question.
It does, but I'm also going to now flip it back to you and ask you. So, with the meditation and with, embracing that courage, is there anything that keeps you up at night now these days?
Well, there's a number of things I need to do to sleep through the night.
It's a loaded question.
Up at night. There's a lot of things that keep me up at night. And I think that's super common for people, for everyone, and especially for entrepreneurs, because this does not shut off very easily. I could just do that one more thing right now, pull my laptop up, pull my phone out. So this is what I have had to do, and it's working very well for me. All my devices are in another room. They're not in my bedroom where I'm sleeping. They're in another room. I can't even see them. I also put my phone on Do Not Disturb before I go to sleep, so that the first moment that I look at my phone in the morning, I'm not going to be seeing any notifications, right? It doesn't look like anyone sent me anything. And I'm not, oh, what does that person sent me right now? Put it on Do Not Disturb, put it in another room. I have an old-fashioned alarm clock, a radio alarm clock that does just fine with a backup battery, and that is my alarm. And if I'm curious what time it is, I'm looking at my alarm clock. I'm not looking at my phone. That is really disrupting your sleep, right? And if my mind wakes up and I have to go to the washroom in the middle of the night and I crawl back in bed, it's 3 a.m., this turns on in those few seconds, okay? And it's like, I should do this. What about that? What about that? Oh, but my laptop is downstairs and my phone is downstairs and I can't easily get to it. So it's amazing how that will help you sleep. But yeah, there's a lot of things that keep me up at night. Usually they're task related, or if I'm facing major issues, like a truck just drove through my building, that did keep me up for probably a week or so.
Sure.
A lot of things will keep you up at night. You have to build in tactics to set the stage where you're sleeping to make sure that you can get rest.
Yeah, no, I like that. And the one thing I started doing, not only do I have my phone with its pre-scheduled nighttime mode, when I put it down at night now, I actually put on airplane mode. So there is zero chance you getting a hold of me on my phone till I get to it and turn it off airplane mode, because I just don't even want to see anything till I'm ready to see it, because otherwise, like, it just ruins my morning too. So I got to stay away from that. All right, so I like this one, and I'm going to end off our podcast with a fun one here. So let's roll the time machine back. The university, Jennie, getting into that campus and hearing about getting that job. What would be that one piece of advice that you would give yourself today, knowing what you know? Let's call it, well, you just graduated, so 5 years ago, something like that.
That's so nice. I graduated in 2009.
Okay, well, I don't want to
I
tell you when I
appreciate that.
graduated. No problem. I'm
You
just
could
gonna
be my
say,
best friend now.
there you go, there you go. I'm in the 1900s when I graduated. As the next gen call us dinosaurs. So, what would you tell yourself fresh out of school or going into school? What would be that piece of advice to help them get through the next couple of years?
So the advice I would give young people, and this might be unpopular, but I'm just going to say it. I'm not going to make this sound rosy and nice. I'm just going to be direct. Nothing is below you. Okay. I know that you've been told that you've just gone to a prestigious school and you've paid a lot of money. For me, I spent out of my own pocket, no one helped me, $45,000 on a 3-year Bachelor of Arts degree. Okay. It's going to be a lot more than that now. You could be paying $80,000 for a 4-year BA here in Canada. Okay, so you've spent a lot of money. In that process, you've been told a lot of lies. Okay, nothing is below you. You need to apply to as many jobs as possible. I graduated in 2009, 1 year after the 2008 financial crisis. They were saying it was the worst year on record since the 80s for new grads coming out of university and college to find employment. That was very true. For me, I decided nothing is below me. I will work anywhere. I will clean toilets. I will work at Tim Hortons. I will work at Radio Shack when that was a thing, Blockbuster when that was a thing. I will work at Roots. I'll work at any clothing store. I will work 3 retail jobs if I need to. I will work anywhere to be able to pay the rent. And I didn't own a car, and I bussed everywhere for the first 4 years of my career. And I had roommates when I didn't want them to be able to afford the rent. We need a reality check in this country that nothing is below us. Okay. We don't deserve things. We have to earn them. That is how it works, unfortunately. I think with social media, we can be so conditioned that, oh, I need to have this lifestyle and I need to have my own apartment with no roommates and it has to have a certain view of the city. And why would I take the bus when I deserve a car? I don't want to take the bus and that's uncomfortable. And you know what? We're going to have to do a number of things we don't like in order to build wealth slowly but surely. And that can include taking a job you really don't want, that you feel is beneath you. Guess what? It probably is, because you're a very talented and smart person. But you just have to be prepared. Take any job. Find a way to pay those bills. Find a way to get a roommate, split the cost of living. Don't get a car until you absolutely need to. Like keep those expenses low and stop looking to social media for examples of this lavish lifestyle. Guess what? It's so rare. It's like the 1% of people that hit that, and no one's giving you the advice you really need to hear. So just don't be too good to do anything, okay? Take the jobs that you don't want to take, do the things you don't want to do, get up every day and keep doing it. And over that period of time, all of a sudden, you have a year experience doing something. You have 2 years doing something. And it's
Mhm.
difficult to get your first job when every single job description says minimum 3 years experience required. How do you get your first 3 years experience? The other thing I would say is you must go out and volunteer. For me, I couldn't find the jobs that interested me at first. So I found volunteer positions where I got the same work experience. That is something that is invaluable, because then you can say, I have a year experience doing this, and therefore I'm now qualified to be hired to do that kind of work. So it's going to take some time and sacrifice. But you can do it. You're smart. You've gone to school. You've gotten a degree, and just put your nose down, work hard. That's it.
Yeah, no, I love that piece of advice, because I tell people all the time, like, my first year when I started this business, I worked a construction side hustle and I barely made 30 grand out of this company when I started it my first year. So it was definitely not going to pay the bills. And I had to do virtually anything and everything to get this thing off the ground. And yeah, another one is that social media stuff. A lot of kids and a lot of people out there don't realize that the Ferrari and the luxury vehicles are rental vehicles. Um, and or they were somewhere and took some limelight shots that the highlight reel, but nothing of that was theirs. It's all borrowed or staged to that effect. So yeah, the unicorns out there are literally that. They are unicorns, and that is not reality for 99% of the rest of the world. So that is definitely not an example of how the rest of society and the rest of the world live. So I agree
Yeah.
with you on all of those, and I echo that. So yeah, no, definitely, Jennie, I want to thank you. That was
Thank you.
a serious power hour. Really enjoyed that.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you to all our listeners. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, please like and subscribe. Again, we're always looking for amazing entrepreneurs and leaders to be on our podcast. So if you know of anybody, please feel to reach out. Again, Jennie, it was a great having you on our show. Hopefully, we'll get you back on maybe that AI conversation.
Yes.
And looking forward to seeing much success to you in this year.
Thank you.
Have yourself a great day.